Arnold Schwarzenegger in True Lies, starring Jamie Lee Curtis.
She did a great job, the way she danced and the way she kind of acted clumsy.
Everyone remembers True Lies for its non-stop explosions, Arnold Schwarzenegger's one-liners, and that jaw-dropping chemistry between him and Jamie Lee Curtis. But behind every iconic frame of this 1994 spy action classic, there's a story most fans never heard, stories full of near disasters, real-life heartbreak turned into comedy, million-dollar gambles, and even a controversy that still sparks debate today. So buckle up, because by the end of this video, you'll never look at True Lies the same way again. Let's start with the scene everyone remembers. Jamie Lee Curtis performing that sultry, seductive dance for Schwarzenegger's character, pretending she's a stripper without realizing her husband is the client watching from the shadows. It's one of the most talked about moments in 90s cinema. But here's the twist. During filming, Curtis lost her footing on the bedpost and tumbled to the floor. Most people assumed this was a complete accident that just happened to make the final cut because it looked so natural. In reality, Curtis later admitted the fall was something she had planned herself, though she was determined not to repeat it more than once or twice, since she was wearing heels and risked twisting her ankle. When she hit the floor, she barely broke character, smoothly continuing the routine as if nothing had happened. Schwarzenegger, on the other hand, couldn't fully hide his genuine surprise for a split second, and that flicker of real reaction is exactly what convinced director James Cameron to keep the take instead of reshooting it. That tiny moment of authenticity is part of why the scene still feels so alive decades later. As wild as that scene was, it wasn't even Curtis's most daring contribution to the film. Later in the movie, her character ends up dangling from a helicopter high above the water during one of the film's biggest action set pieces. Any reasonable actress would have happily handed that sequence over to a stunt double, and honestly, Cameron offered her exactly that option. But Curtis wasn't interested in sitting it out. When she found out Cameron himself planned to hang from the helicopter's open door just to get her close-up shot, she basically told him that if he was willing to take that risk, so was she. To make it even more memorable, she chose to perform the stunt on her 36th birthday, treating it almost like a personal milestone. She spent weeks training beforehand, building both the physical strength and the mental focus needed for a sequence where the helicopter would be moving at speeds close to 70 miles an hour. When the cameras finally rolled, she stayed remarkably composed, holding her form despite the wind, the height, and the very real danger, turning what could have been a terrifying ordeal into one of the most striking images in the film. Now let's talk about the comedy side of True Lies, because some of the biggest laughs in the movie weren't even written by the original screenwriters. Tom Arnold's character, Albert Gibson, gets one particularly memorable moment where he complains about his marriage falling apart, joking that his wife took everything in the divorce, right down to the ice cube trays. Audiences howled, but almost nobody realized this line came straight from Arnold's real life. At the time, he was going through an extremely public and messy divorce from comedian Roseanne Barr, and he jokingly told Cameron about the ice cube trays as an example of just how petty things had gotten. Cameron found the line so perfectly suited to Gibson's bitter but funny personality that he wrote it straight into the script, turning Arnold's real pain into one of the film's funniest throwaway jokes. Speaking of going big, James Cameron wasn't satisfied with faking the film's aerial action using effects alone. To get the kind of realism he wanted, he arranged to rent actual military aircraft, specifically a trio of Marine Harrier jets, directly from the US government. This wasn't cheap by any stretch. Each hour these jets spent in the air cost roughly $2,400, and by the time filming wrapped, the total bill for renting them had climbed to around $100,000. For Cameron, though, it was money well spent, since the footage gave the film a sense of scale and authenticity that no amount of computer-generated imagery could have matched at the time. Even the side characters had hidden inspirations. Charlton Heston played Spencer Trilby, the no-nonsense leader of the secretive Omega Sector, complete with a commanding presence and a distinctive eye patch. If that combination sounds familiar, it's because the character was clearly modeled on Marvel's Nick Fury, right down to leading a covert agency that handles global threats much like S.H.I.E.L.D. It's a small detail, but one that gave the film an extra layer of comic book energy long before superhero movies became Hollywood's biggest business. Of course, not every challenge on set involved explosions or helicopters. Schwarzenegger faced one of his toughest assignments when his character had to perform a smooth, romantic tango with Curtis's character during an undercover mission. For an actor known almost entirely for action roles, this was completely uncharted territory. To pull it off convincingly, Schwarzenegger committed to roughly 6 months of intensive dance training, working with professional instructors to master every step and turn. He even studied Al Pacino's tango performance from Scent of a Woman for inspiration, hoping to capture that same blend of confidence and elegance. The end result was a scene that showed off a side of Schwarzenegger audiences had never really seen before: graceful, controlled, and surprisingly charming. Not every ambitious idea made it to the final cut, though. One scene that was filmed but ultimately removed involved the film's villain, Juno Skinner, threatening Helen Tasker by placing a live grenade between her legs during a tense standoff, daring her not to move. Helen fires back with a sharp, biting comment before eventually escaping, and later passes the grenade to Harry, who cleverly uses one of her diamond earrings to rearm it before using it against the terrorists in the climax. It's a clever piece of setup and payoff, but it was cut for pacing reasons, which left audiences with a moment later in the film where Harry suddenly has a grenade with no real explanation for where it came from. Had this sequence stayed in, it would have given Helen's character more depth and tied the couple's actions together in a much more satisfying way. Interestingly, a lot of the film's comedy almost didn't happen the way audiences remember it. Cameron, despite being best known for intense sci-fi work like Aliens and Terminator 2, wasn't happy with the humor in the original script and decided to rewrite nearly all of it himself. In the end, only a couple of jokes from the original draft survived into the finished film, including Schwarzenegger's now iconic line right before he launches a missile at a villain strapped to it. Most of the witty back and forth between Harry and Albert Gibson came either from Cameron's rewrites or from improvisation on set, and that combination is a big reason the film balances big action with genuine laughs so well. Getting Tom Arnold into the movie at all was its own behind-the-scenes battle. Studio executives were nervous about casting him because of how much negative attention his divorce from Roseanne Barr had brought him in the tabloids, and they worried it could reflect poorly on the film. Cameron, however, was convinced Arnold's comedic timing was exactly what the role needed, and he reportedly threatened to walk away from the entire project if the studio didn't agree to cast him. Faced with the possibility of losing their director, the studio backed down, and Arnold's performance ended up being one of the most beloved parts of the film, proving Cameron's instincts right. Unfortunately, not everything connected to True Lies has a happy ending. Years after the film's release, Eliza Dushku, who played Harry and Helen's daughter in the movie, came forward with deeply troubling claims about her experience on set. According to Dushku, who was only 12 years old at the time, she was subjected to inappropriate and sexually suggestive comments from a stunt coordinator, leaving her feeling unsafe. Her family pursued legal action over the matter. On top of that, she also said she was injured during a stunt sequence when a safety rig malfunctioned, causing her to collide with a platform and hurt her ribs, an injury she attributed to negligence on the crew's part. These revelations, which came out long after the film's release, cast a serious shadow over a production that had otherwise been remembered fondly, and they helped fuel broader conversations about how child actors are protected on movie sets. For years, there was genuine momentum behind a sequel. Both Cameron and Schwarzenegger wanted to reunite for True Lies 2, continuing the story of Harry and Helen Tasker into the late 90s, and the creative team spent considerable time developing a script meant to top the original's action set pieces. But real-world events got in the way. After a major national tragedy involving terrorism shook the country, a light-hearted action comedy built around terrorism suddenly felt deeply out of touch. Cameron came to realize that, however profitable a sequel might have been, releasing a film where Harry battles Middle Eastern villains for laughs would come across as tone-deaf at a moment when people were genuinely frightened, and the project was quietly shelved for good. While that sequel was still being developed, Schwarzenegger had a genuinely terrifying close call on set. During a sequence where his character was supposed to cling to the outside of a passenger jet as it taxied down the runway, a miscommunication between the stunt team and the pilots led the crew to believe Schwarzenegger had already detached and was clear of the aircraft. The pilots throttled the engines to full power for takeoff while he was still attached to the fuselage, and the jet rocketed forward at speeds well over 100 miles per hour. Schwarzenegger managed to release his safety line just in time and rolled away from the plane before it could drag him into the runway or its engines. He later described it as one of the scariest moments of his entire career. A career filled with dangerous stunts. And it's a sobering reminder of how quickly things can go wrong even with experienced professionals involved. True Lies also spawned a video game shortly after its release, putting players in Harry Tasker's shoes for a series of secret missions packed with gadgets and gunfights. Despite being developed by a well-regarded studio and carrying the official movie license, the game launched on the Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and PC to a fairly muted response, getting overshadowed by other movie tie-in games of the era. Over time, it picked up a small following among retro game collectors, but most fans of the film have no idea it even exists, and those who have played it generally agree it failed to capture the excitement and personality of the movie it was based on. The film hasn't been without its share of criticism either. Its portrayal of Arab and Middle Eastern characters as the primary villains drew significant backlash, particularly the performance of Art Malik as the terrorist leader, whose exaggerated mannerisms and accent struck many as leaning into harmful stereotypes during a period when prejudice against Arab communities was already running high following the Gulf War. Critics argued that this kind of portrayal in a major blockbuster reinforced negative perceptions of an entire group of people, and the debate around that casting and characterization still comes up in discussions about the film today. Finally, there's a sequence many fans don't realize was originally meant to be far bigger. The bathroom brawl where Harry takes on a group of attackers was initially conceived as a much longer, more elaborate fight, choreographed by legendary stunt coordinator Benny Dobbins, with Harry using everyday objects as improvised weapons while taking down enemies one after another in increasingly creative ways. As filming approached, though, the team grew concerned that such an intense, drawn-out sequence might overwhelm audiences, so they scaled it back to the shorter version that made it into the final film. It's still an exciting scene, but the original concept would have pushed Harry's against-the-odds heroics even further. From planned stunts disguised as accidents to real-life heartbreak turned into comedy gold. From million-dollar military jets to a near-fatal mishap on a runway, True Lies turned out to be just as dramatic off-screen as it was on. So tell us, which of these stories caught you most off guard? Let us know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this look behind the curtain, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.